Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast.
Like physically, we were all fine. It was purely psychological at that point. And it was like in my head since that day, I was like, I'm going to come back and do an expedition race.
Okay, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back by dawn, call the president.
You're going the wrong way! What? You're going the wrong way! He says we're going the wrong way!
Oh, he's drunk. How would he know where we're going?
Yeah, how would he know? Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. We have a momentous evening tonight. We have our first three-time guest coming on the show. That's right. This is over 50 episodes of the Dark Zone, and one person has been on 3 times. Well, that's not really true because Brent Friedland's been on a couple of times, but let's not talk about him. Let's talk about Mary Foster. Mary Foster is our first official 3-time visitor. She's been on Dark Zone 36, talking about her race at Endless Mountains, Dark Zone 47, which was a flash episode during Nationals, and now episode 50-something, we have Mary joining us to talk about her trajectory into the sport, how she went from being not really a big racer to being more of a racer to being a really big racer now and having done multi-day stuff. So Mary, welcome to the Dark Zone. Thank you for coming on the show. We're really, really grateful that you're here.
Thanks for having me.
So, as I was saying before we began to chat here, a large part of the Dark Zone, we try really, really hard to focus on the beginner racer, people who are new to the sport, getting into it. They may hear about racing. They may hear about a 6-hour race or a 10-hour race, but making that leap feels like a lot. Can you walk us through your entry to the sport? When did you first learn about AR? When did you dip your toe into the water? How did it go for you?
So my intro to the sport was I just come back from my honeymoon and I went out to dinner with my best friend, Samantha. She said at the time we were doing like Spartan races, obstacle course races, half marathon runs, things like that. And we went out to dinner when I got back from my honeymoon and she was like, hey, I found this race. I think we should do it. The race was Buff Betty, 6-hour Buff Betty, October 2013. I didn't even own a bike. I hadn't been on a bike since I was, 8, 9. Didn't own a bike. Thought she was crazy. But we decided to go for it. So I bought a bike and I rode it 2 or 3 times. And then we went to the Buff Betty. And that's how I got started. We had no idea what we were doing. We thought we knew how to use a compass before we started the race. We thought we were in good shape before we started the race. We ended up pulling the directions on how to use a compass out of my pack. It's 10 minutes into the race because apparently we forgot how to use a compass. And we made it through the whole 6 hours. And I remember sitting at the picnic table at the end of that race, hurting. Every part of my body hurt. And she was the same way. And we were looking around like everybody's laughing, walking around, having a good time. And we were like, do they not hurt right now? And we thought we were in shape. And that's how we got hooked.
How dedicated were you to those activities? Were they social in nature or were you doing your best to be as competitive and as fast as possible?
I wouldn't say that I was super dedicated to any one thing. Was kind of open for anything. If somebody was like, hey, let's do this, obviously I'd be like, all right, sure, I'll try that. I was at that point at the start of adventure racing. Greg and I were heavily into getting doing personal training at the gym and group fitness classes and stuff. So there wasn't really one thing that I was into, and I was kind of open to trying anything. And I just got hooked on adventure racing, as do most.
And so you had the 6-hour buff, Betty. I love the fact that you had to stop during the race to read the instructions on how a compass works.
Oh yeah, had to pull them out in the middle.
Like full blown, take it out like the N means this, and we turn in this direction.
Oh yeah, full blown. Pulled out the instructions, laid them on the ground. Like laid the compass beside the instructions, and we're both like hovering over this. Like, are we doing this right? Because when they said start, we thought we knew what we were doing with the compass, but then everybody else ran in a completely different direction than we went. And we just kept going because we were like,
you're like, we figured this out. Those fools out there, they run the wrong way.
Of course. We were like, what are they doing? And then when we got to the lake, we realized we were not supposed to be at the lake.
Got it. And then it was time to read the instructions.
Yes. And that's when we pulled out the instructions.
So during that experience, pretty big leap, right? So many people in the world, they don't want to show weakness. They don't want to show vulnerability. They don't want to show that they're not good at something. And so too many people avoid doing things like that because they're concerned about how others will perceive them.
Oh, sure.
Why not for you?
That's not, I wouldn't say that for myself. So Samantha and I raced together, just the two of us, for a few years, until she, I guess you could say, retired from the sport. When she retired from the sport, she had been my only teammate ever. And I almost refused to race with anybody because I didn't believe that I could keep up. I didn't believe that I had the skills. And I almost needed to prove to myself that I could do it by myself before I would do it with other people. So I actually raced solo quite a bit, just to push my own boundaries, get lost on my own, get found on my own, and have that confidence that, yeah, maybe I can race with other people. Maybe I'm not as slow as I thought I was, or maybe my nav isn't as bad as I think it is. I raced solo for quite a while, actually, until I started racing with others again. And
so you and Samantha raced together as a team, but from what you're saying there, you were really basically one person, right? You were a unit racing together, and you were happy to be vulnerable in front of her and not really do a good job. But when she decided to pursue other things and she left the sport and sports in general, it was one of these things where you needed some time by yourself to hone your own skills before you felt comfortable going out with other people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I just, like I said, I was of the mindset that I wasn't good enough to race with anybody else, so, or why would anybody, if someone asked me to race with them at that time, I would always say no, because of course, in the back of my head, I'd be like, I can't keep up with them, or, what have you.
So what did you do to get better at it? Walk us through the experience of the solo racing, skills, practices. How did you get from point A to point B where you felt comfortable racing with other people?
I spent a lot of time on nav. Obviously you could be as fast as you want to be, but if your navigation skills are not great, you're going to be a little slower naturally. I would go to every single orienteering meet that I could get my hands on, and I would pick the hardest course. And when I first started going, I would never finish. I would get through maybe half a course because I was either so slow or my nav was so bad that I could never finish a course. But I was determined to go and finish a hard course. And I just kept doing that every weekend through orienteering season. And I would use that as my hiking and my running training as well. And, map skills, learning to read a map on the go, learning to trust the compass, learning to use the compass. And then I would supplement that with days in the gym, time on the bike, other runs during the week. And I just kept building on that, and then just racing as much as possible too. There's something to be said for being in the race environment and having the transition areas and, all the other people out on course with you as well, and having that race pressure, so to speak.
And so your growth as a racer really came out of the fact that you were willing to accept the fact that because your skill set needed development, you had no problem going out there again and again and again and keep getting incrementally better over time.
Right. I'm very much a hands-on learner. I love to read, and of course read Mark Latanzi's book and, other books about adventure racing, some of the older school books about adventure racing. But until I kept doing the things, it didn't really register.
Gotcha.
So I kept doing all the things, until it clicked. And still, even to this day, I mean, like you said, it's been 9 years now. I mean, I still have bad days navigating, things still don't always register.
Gotcha. Yeah, there are days where we all forget how maps work.
Yeah.
We're all there. But I think it's important for the newer racer out there who's listening to this, that your trajectory wasn't straight up, wasn't a hockey stick, right? You didn't go from A to B, that there was progression, regression, but there was the consistent attempting of the work, right? You found yourself at orienteering meets. You picked the hardest course. You recognize that failure on that course, and failure is a relative term, but failure on that course was happening. And you said that you were slow and that your navigation was weak, but at least you had the ability, you had the personal capacity to say, I'm not good at this right now, but I'm willing to sacrifice this to get better at it down the road. And I think that's an important thing, because so many people coming into a sport that's as complex as adventure racing, you have to realize that all of us have had a very, very steep learning curve, and you really personify that.
Even to this day, you go out on course and you have a bad map day, right? It's like you'd never looked at a map before. I feel like I'm still constantly learning things, and you go to races and you talk to other racers and you get to know people and you learn other things or different ways of doing things. So I'm still learning. I still feel like there's a lot to learn from the racers that have been doing it a lot longer than I have. And any bit of knowledge that I can get and try out on my next race or my next training, it's worth trying, because you never know what's going to work for you, right? Until you try it. And that's kind of how I learn. It's just by trying everything and doing it.
What did you think was going to be hard for you versus what was actually hard for you? Or did you kind of know what was coming? Did you know that where you struggled and this was going to be a challenge? Or did you surprise yourself at all?
I think I surprised myself at how to navigate and the ability to be able to navigate. And I guess I don't want to say how quickly I picked that up, because it did take time, but the basics of it, how quickly I picked the basics up. I knew, like, the physical aspect, especially when you get into the longer races, you've got to train for it. And, I knew there was going to be some hurdles there, but I'm one of those people who I enjoy the training as much as I do the racing. And I don't look at my training schedule and groan, not to say there aren't some days where I'm like, I don't want to do that. But, I look at it as an opportunity for growth and for improvement and to get faster and be stronger. So, there's a lot of mindset to it as well, I guess.
What was hard about the training?
The biking, because I wasn't a biker. I didn't own a bike originally. We live in a very rocky terrain area, a lot of hills in Virginia. And my husband is a mountain biker, and he races now too. He took me out to some of the most technical to learn to ride on. And his thought was, well, if you're going to learn to ride, why not learn on this stuff?
Right.
And you're wrecking and hitting rocks and door stopping on your bike and stuff and getting frustrated. But again, I treated it like navigation and picked some of the hardest trails and just kept riding.
So I'm keeping sort of an informal list here of things that you would tell newer racers. And it sounds like one thing here is intentionally do hard things. Like you chose the hardest O course and you chose the hardest place to ride your bike. So it sounds like that was an early part of your ethic that really helped you.
For sure. Absolutely. And even 9 years later, I still intentionally do harder things. And I think part of that is because when you're racing and you have a map and things are just clicking, it makes those things when they're clicking that much better because you've already done the hard, and it's like, now that you're like, this is great.
Right.
It makes the great even better when you've done all, a lot of the hard things.
Got you. When you're going into an event and you've done the preparation and you've done the hard work, when you get into it, actually, not that it's easy is a difficult term to use, but to your point, there's a sense, I think the word is flow, right? When things are flowing nicely and they're going really well. Yeah.
And I like the continual challenge too, right? Like I'm like everybody else. I get bored of things. So anything hard or harder that I can keep doing and challenging myself and racing and training, and I'm all for it.
Were you always that way, even as a kid?
No, I was a super lazy kid. Super lazy. We lived in the woods and I would climb the occasional tree and walk from the bus stop to the house when my parents wouldn't pick me up. But outside of that, I was a big reader. I was usually always in bed reading a book. So I was super lazy.
Well, let's nerd out on the books for a second. What was your favorite books growing up?
Oh, I'm definitely a mystery, like psychological thriller reader. I still, to this day, read a lot of those kind of books.
So in reality, so you still are attracted to books that are basically puzzles.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Which jumps over to adventure racing a bit because adventure racing is one big puzzle.
Yes, it is.
Right. Interesting. And so obviously the transition from being lazy, your word, not mine, being lazy to not being lazy was that you found the social aspect through your friends, which then grew you into adventure racing, and the rest is history.
Yep, pretty much. It's kind of weird when you put it that way.
Right. So you mentioned mindset before, right? So you've checked off the body parts, right? The fact that you trained, you ran, you had gym days, you did hard cycling, but you mentioned mindset, right? And that's half the battle. So what's your inner talk like? What's your monologue you're telling yourself when things are hard?
I tell myself, you chose to be here. You've trained to be here. You want to be here. So, just be here, try not to get frustrated, be in the moment. If you're frustrated, great, let it out, let it go and move on. It's like at the end of the day, I enjoy being in the woods and I enjoy seeing new things and being places nobody else really gets to go. And I remind myself of that when things get hard. And if that means I need to sit down for a second and look around and get my head out of the map, then I'll do it. Reset the brain and then get moving again.
So I think you've already answered my next question which was going to be that why do we intentionally seek out this kind of discomfort?
I do. Obviously the challenge, the mental challenge, the physical challenge, but it's the opportunity to go places that most people would not and do things most people would not. And it's not to come back and say, oh, I did this or I did that, because most people don't understand it anyways. At least for me, it's mentally knowing for the next time that you've already kind of been in this place, different place, but kind of the same place before. You can do it again. Whether it was the past race or a race 2 years ago, it's thinking back on that moment. It's like you you can do this. You've done this.
Right. There's the expression, I work with children for a living, and very often we talk about self-esteem, right? We want you to feel good about yourself. And one thing that we've learned in schools is that me telling you you're a good person does not increase your self-esteem. It doesn't happen that way. You going and doing good things, committing esteemable acts, give you a sense of self-esteem. And I think you've touched on a lot of what adventure racers know, is that by going out and by doing these hard things and doing them intentionally and choosing to be there, it empowers us to feel better about ourselves when the next hard thing comes along. And there's a bit of a transference to our life outside of adventure racing.
Oh, absolutely. I can look back on, how I was 5 years ago, 9 years ago, and it's changed me. I think it's changed me for the better. I feel like I handle day-to-day situations calmer than I may have in the past. I readily admit that I used to be easily to frustrate and like quick to anger, and the littlest thing would be the biggest annoyance. And now I find myself going, it is what it is. And sometimes I even stop and I think, wow, 5 years ago, I'd be so mad right now. And today I'm like, whatever, such is life.
And you think that's an outgrowth of the, I'm going to use the word callous, not the right word to use, but the fact that these hard experiences, they kind of callous us a little bit. They make us better to meet life's challenges.
I don't know. The sport has almost given me a different outlook on life too. I spent a lot of time alone in the woods, obviously, especially when I was racing solo a lot. And it just gave you a lot of time to think and realize what is important and what really isn't important, and what's worth getting upset about and what's not.
I agree with that. I also think too, the adventure racing mindset of, I look at the distance between one checkpoint to another as a problem to solve. Yeah. And a big part in life is just solve the next problem. Not that life, let's not get too philosophical. Life is challenging, life has problems, but it's not one problem to another, but it's the next thing. Like, I've made it to this point. I'm here now. I now need to go to the next point. And that's what you do. You navigate from spot to spot to spot. And by the time you realize that you've traveled a farther distance than you ever thought that you could.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my husband and I work with Greg. He's owned his own business for 20 years. And I started working with him running some of the back end stuff a year and a half ago now. And the problem solving skills that I've learned in adventure racing, I find help me with business, with helping him run the business, the day-to-day stuff like scheduling mishaps and product, misplacement and, not getting things on time. It's like it's weird how it all helps each other.
So that 6 Hour Buff Betty was 9 years ago. And over the course of the years, I'm curious to hear about, what was it like when you first started racing with other people? What did you bring to that? How was that for you?
Oh, I was nervous, super nervous. Am I going to slow him down? If I'm nabbing, am I going to make mistakes? Are they going to get mad at me? It's like interestingly enough, my first kind of introduction back into racing with others, what I would do is sign up as a soloist and they would sign up as a soloist, but we'd race together. So that gave me a little bit of comfort in the fact that if I was making them mad or slowing them down, they could leave and I was okay with it.
So you had an emergency exit.
Yeah,
right?
Thankfully nobody ever left me. We all stuck together, but it kind of gives you that little bit of peace of mind.
Well, psychologically, that's pretty. Psychologically, knowing that no matter what happens, you're not going to weigh down your teammate was a soft entry for you to be a teammate.
Yep. Yeah, that's how I started racing with others, and then it just kind of grew from there. And now I kind of have my little core group that that we consistently race with together. And I am, especially in the past year or so, I'm much, much more open now to having others on my team, even like people I haven't raced with before, or if someone asked me to race with them, I'm much more open to it. And a lot of that is due to my confidence level.
Right.
Thanks to the sport.
Yeah, because now you have capacity. Now you have a skill set because you've done those hard things and you've done them successfully. So as a result, you're a different person now than you were X amount of years ago when you first raced by yourself, then raced by yourself with other people, right? Solo to solo. Yeah. And now you race yourself as a teammate. So, you know, and the team dynamic, I was chatting with someone the other day who's involved in swim run. And he was talking about how the team dynamic is so much different than triathlon or running or even Spartan races. Someone who's worked successfully with teams, what makes it go well? What do you bring to the table, and what should a good teammate bring to the table to have it be an effective team?
For the teams that I race with, or the core group of people that I commonly race with, a huge one for me, it comes down to personalities. If we can't all get along and have a same general personality sense, then it could creep over into the other aspects of racing. So I generally tend to seek out or race with others that have the same, kind of mindset and personality before any other skill level.
Gotcha.
And then it's dependent upon the race too. Like, what are your goals of that race? Is it just for training? Are you trying to race it to win it? That kind of thing. But I think above all else, if you can't have a good time and get along, then you're not going to have a good race. Race.
Well, you always find too that it's the teammate connection over attitudes and personality will far outweigh the physical capacity.
Absolutely.
By a mile. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's good advice for someone who's listening to this, who's newer, is worry far less about your physical capacity. Not that you have to have physical capacity. Let's be honest with each other. But when you're in a race and things are challenging and things are hard, it's the ability, right, that you're having in terms of working together is what your mind brings to the race that is your greatest asset, necessarily your physical component.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to race with people who are like-minded, who are not wanting to quit when it gets tough,
right?
Who can help problem solve when it gets tough, who can speak up and know what they need and can voice what they need, and can be an active teammate,
right.
and laugh when it gets hard, not get angry when it gets hard. I mean. Right. We all have our moments, right?
Sure.
But if I get angry, just laugh at me and leave me alone. And then in 5 minutes, I'll be fine.
Right. Well, the strategy that I've said to my teammates, listen, I'm in a bad place right now. I need a little time by myself.
Yep.
I'm going to pedal up the road a little bit. I'm not mad at anybody. You've done nothing wrong. I just need to regroup a little bit myself. You regroup, you have a little self-therapy session, then you fall back into the team and everything is much better, right? People who could recognize it about themselves. Right.
Yeah. And people who can give you that space in that moment and not, bug you.
Right. Or put it on themselves, thinking that they did something wrong to put you in that spot. Right. Or if they've done, at least they recognize it in the race. So
yes.
Okay. So here's the Mary Forster rule number 4 is that personality trumps fitness. Not all the time, but it's pretty much a good rule to focus on for newer racers, right?
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. It's huge. I'm willing to work with somebody if their personality is great and we get along really well and, all that criteria, the fitness will come, right? The fitness will come. If they're showing me that they're putting in the training and they're doing the work, that's all I ask, right? Because at the end of the day, I know you're going to work as hard as you can, but we'll have a good time doing it. You know what I mean?
Right. And you can have a good laugh about it, right? And you're not necessarily, you aren't too worried about where you're placing in the races. It's a growth experience. You're getting better. And I've had the chance over the course of the racing that I've done and the racing that you've done. We've seen people who've had that really nice trajectory who've grown into the sport and just gotten better and better and better. And it's wonderful to see that, to look up one day and somebody who was new and having a hard time is now down the road and is really strong in a race. So it's nice to see that.
Yep.
Getting into the more nitty gritty of the racing, everybody is an N of one. What do you, in terms of nutrition during a race, are you real food? Are you bars and gels? Are you whatever's in your teammate's pack? Like, how do you fuel yourself during a race?
I'll eat whatever. Yeah, I don't really, when I first started racing, I took it, like most people, as an opportunity to have it be a sugar fest.
Right.
I have dialed that back some, and I have mixed in, more, I guess, savory, salty foods. I can't do the sweet quite like I used to,
right.
but I'll eat anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, right, there are some people who are they're able to put down whatever they want during a race. And as a result of that, it's great. But I'm assuming for the longer races, you have to work in real food.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I definitely, not so much. I don't worry so much about it for the 24 to 30 hour ones. I can still tend to get away with not being as particular in those races. And I do, I like liquid calories too.
Yeah.
I use Scratch products, and they have like the super fuel and stuff like that. So I use some of that. But definitely in, the much longer races, real food is big.
Yeah. One thing I've seen more and more of, and the Dark Zone, by the way, has no official sponsors, right? So this isn't a product placement at all. Spring Energy is very, very good. Yeah. Spring Energy. I mean, it's expensive, but it's expensive. You're paying over $2 for a goo, but you can't beat the quality of the product.
Their, I don't remember what it's called. Their applesauce, cinnamon applesauce one. Yep. It's 180 calories in that small little goo packet.
Yep.
And it's delicious. Applesauce is never a bad thing, right? It's like goes down easy. Plus you get a little like hydration with it. And it's a lot of calories. Yeah, I eat a lot of those.
Yeah, I find that they're 350 calorie wolf packs. So it's almost like the baby food. You're in a race, and I find over time I lose the capacity to, don't worry, if I see a diner or coffee shop, we're stopping, we're eating a burger. But I find that my ability to put down solid food runs out during a race. And knowing but those 350 calorie wolf packs are just there. It's because it's a lot of calories really quickly. It's not a lot of weight on your system, and off you go. So Spring Energy, if you're out there, Spring Energy, feel free to send stuff my way. But I agree with you. I think they're very, very strong. And I do also agree with you that for the 24 to 36 hour races, you can get away with a lot of food that doesn't really matter. It's when it gets longer, it gets a lot harder. I
was just going to say, I do a lot of like the applesauce pouchy type things, just because it's easy. Right.
Just goes right down. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Especially when you start losing your appetite later in the race. Because I find that I have a tough time. The running joke is my teammate Jim gets mad at me because after a big long day, I just want to go to bed. And he's like, you have to eat something. You cannot eat something. So that's a thing I've learned over time. What about gear? How did you, sometimes newer racers have a little bit of gear paralysis because there's so much choice and there's so much between the shoes and the packs and the clothes and this and that. How have you grown in your understanding of what gear works for you?
So I probably am much like other racers that started with some gear, and that is not the gear I'm using now. But the gear that I use now, I'm pretty set on. So I've been using it consistently for a handful of years at this point. As far as like the pack and the shoes. And,
sure. What's your pack choice? What do you like?
My go-to for 24-hour-ish races is the Osprey Duro pack.
Yep. Nice pack.
I love that pack.
Very nice. Yep.
For anything longer, I have the Ultimate Direction. I think it's the Fast Pack 30.
Yep. UD, very strong. Yep.
Yeah, I love that pack too. Those are my go-to packs. And then shoes, I wear the Topo Mountain Racers, I think they are. Those are my go-to shoes.
How about foot care? Were you with socks and goo and feet? Because for one of the most common struggles that newer racers have is the fact that their feet just fall apart on them. If they're wet, if they're just, they get all beaten up. How do you take care of your feet during a race?
So interestingly enough, that was not an issue for me until the past year. Prior to that, I didn't really do anything. Just put some socks on and went for it.
That's like Earl Blanchard, who was just on the last episode, that he did nothing for his feet. He wore the same socks for 8 years. He had the same socks. That's all I had to do. No goo, no nothing. Meanwhile, I look like a science experiment, and this guy's walking around like feet like Bigfoot.
Right. I don't know. I did change my socks at least. I might would maybe apply some KT tape here and there every once in a while, but I had Lyme disease and I don't know what it did, but it changed something that affected my feet. So now I'm a huge goo fan. The hike goo, run goo.
It's great. Hike goo's the greatest. Yeah.
I love that stuff. When we did Endless, the 5-day, that stuff was gold.
Yeah.
That and KT tape for hot spots. So those are my kind of now 2 go-tos for foot care.
Now you did 5-day Endless Mountain Adventure Race, which by the way is coming back June 2023. Sign up now, people. You did Endless Mountains. Was that your first 5-day race?
It was.
It was. Okay. And obviously we talk a lot more about it in episode 36, but what was the big lesson that you took out of that race? Because here you are, you're 9 years down the road. You went from the 6-hour Buff Betty, where you had to learn how to read a compass during the race, to now going to 5 days. That sounds like a pretty quick jump. Did you do the traditional 6 to 12 to 24 to 30? Like, what is your racing pedigree been like to tackle 5 days? Or did you just go for it and say, let's go. It's in my backyard. I'm going for it.
No, I definitely did. I would say like a normal trajectory of, the 6 to 12. And then once I did my first 24, which was Shenandoah Epic, I don't remember what year, I think 2015. I think 2015 was the first year I did a first 24. I was hooked on 24. I love overnight. That's my favorite. 24 hours, really, my absolute favorite. 24, 30. So once I started doing those, that's all I wanted to do was 24, hour and 30-hour races. I didn't run to do anything shorter. And I don't really anymore. I'll do a 12-hour, but that's about as short as I go.
Yeah, it has to be close. Traveling for 12 hours is kind of rough, but if it's, I would do a 24-hour every weekend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's great. The overnight, I love the overnight hours.
So you do okay between 2 and 5 a.m. You're fine. Because that's once again, here's the tip for the newer racer out there. If you're doing an overnight race, ignore every thought, feeling, and emotion between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m.
Yes.
Make it to sunrise and then see how you feel.
Ignore any thought, feeling, or emotion in TA during that time period too. Because that could make you quit a race, and then you feel bad that you quit a race for whatever was happening in that moment. But
and I will name check Jonathan Neely right now. Jonathan Neely, he calls the fire blanket rock. He says like your ship will smash up against it. Do not go anywhere near the fire during a race.
I mean, everybody will tell you in adventure racing, don't go near the fire pit.
Yeah. It pulls you in and it's lights out after that.
For sure.
So you made the jump. So after knocking out a 24 racing overnight and then 30 or 36, you felt that a leap to a 5-day race was within your capacity.
Well, I did do C to C.
Okay. So it's 3 days. So it's not really an expedition race. It's 3 days. Okay.
Right. I did that year of COVID. That was the last thing we did before COVID. And then I believe it was 2018. Adventure Enablers was hosting a 3-day race in Virginia. And so I had a team to do that, but we actually ended up dropping after like, I think 24 hours.
Okay.
It was a weird, it wasn't anything physical. There was a bunch of hurricanes coming in, so they were.
Oh, was that the race that Mark had to redo the whole course?
Yeah,
and it was one big out and back. I remember this. Yeah, and kudos to him for pulling that off. But I heard that was a crazy race. Okay.
It was. We were supposed to start like Friday morning, and we ended up starting at like 8 p.m. Thursday night to try and get ahead of this hurricane, which never even happened. And we got to one section and it was a mental thing. Yeah. Like the thought of having to come back through there in a day and a half or what have you, after how hard it had been to get there, we were all just like, this is, and
psychologically that's hard.
Yeah. And that's what it was. Like physically we were all fine. It was purely psychological at that point. And, it was like in my head since that day, I was like, I'm going to come back and do an expedition race. Right. I need revenge on,
you had something to prove. Right.
A multi-day race.
Right. And so now that you're able to check off the box of the 5-day Endless Mountains, what do you see as being clearly you're driven by growth. There's a trajectory that goes. It's now November 2022. We're entering winter up here in the Northern Hemisphere. What does the future look like for you? Going back to Shenandoah Epic, you're looking at another 5-day race. You're going to go to a different race, a bigger race someplace else. Where are you going next?
So actually next year, to I guess essentially build on that, we're looking at doing 2 5-day races.
Okay. What 2?
So we're looking at doing Expedition Ozark beginning of April, and then Endless again in June. So it's like, well, now that we know we can do 1, let's see if we can do 2.
So there's no greater learning experience than actually doing a 5-day race itself. What do you think you're going to take into that experience that you learned at the first Endless Mountains? Like where will you be a different racer?
I know that I can do it now. Granted, it's not going to be the same course. It's not going to be the same weather. It's not going to be the same 5 days, but I have that knowledge that I've done it and can do it, and I can do it again. So, the goal would be to do it even better. I mean, Endless last year was absolutely amazing. I can't wait to do it again next year. So to build on Endless last year, I want to do it better. I want to do it faster. I want to, it's like looking back on it and having kind of a post race team meeting. It's like we all felt way better than we expected to. So we all know that we had some left in the tank, but going into it, we didn't know how we were going to feel on day 4. So I think we were a little reserved, which is fine. We just our only goal was to finish a 5-day race. And now that we've done that, we are kind of chomping at the bit to do it even better.
Yeah. In our talk back at episode 36, you said something that echoed with me, that when I went to Scotland to go race, we actually quoted you in our pre-race planning, was the idea that you wanted to touch every part of the course.
Yes.
That was a big part of that was hunting Bigfoot's big goal for Endless Mountains. And I've actually made that rule number 5, by the way, touch every part of the course. And I think that for the newer racer, when you're tackling a race, whether it be a 6-hour, 12-hour, whatever it is, even a 4-hour race, set the goal of touching every part of the course. Remember, there will always be mandatory checkpoints and optional checkpoints. And don't spend too much time in any one part of the course. Finish the course. Very few people go full course. I mean, that's a big learning curve for a lot of newer racers. It blows their mind that people don't do the entire course because they live in a marathon, Spartan triathlon culture where everyone does the entire course. Well, that doesn't happen.
And not to interrupt you, but something to that point. I've been racing 9 years now. I can count on one hand the number of courses I've cleared.
Right.
But the number of races that I've done really well in and placed in the top 10 and podium is way more than that. So it's, you don't have to, again, be, the fastest, the best at every sport or your navigation to do well in this sport.
Sure. And there are teams that probably set the goal to clear the course that ended up being way off the podium because they spent too much time in any one section.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it happens all the time. I honestly, still to this day, I never go into a course expecting to clear it. I have a big plan and I have an overall plan, but I'm not upset when that plan needs to change or get cut back, or I have to start cutting checkpoints. Because at the end of the day, it's time management, right? And it's like, if that's how I need to manage the time to make it back and finish with it at a time that I'm comfortable with finishing, not seconds to spare. But our main team goal is, like you said, touch every part of the course. I mean, that's why we're out there.
And I think you bring up a good point too when it comes to navigation and team dynamics. There's always a navigator, right? A lead navigator, whoever he or she may be. Their job is to bury their nose in the map. But I can't emphasize enough to teams, you need to have someone with a macro thought of the course. Someone who sees the entire course and is able to say at some point, listen, guys, clock's ticking. We're this far away. Because sometimes navigators, God bless them, are so focused on the next checkpoint, like they live, right, problem to problem, that they lose sight of the big picture. And all of a sudden you find yourself off front in the course and you run the risk of not making it back in time, right? So you need to have that micro management of the course versus the macro understanding of what's going on.
I think one of the benefits for me for having raced solo for so long is I gained that ability to have that micro, but also the overall picture in the back of my head, because there was nobody else to do it for me. Right. So I had to manage my own time. So I think there's a valuable lesson in racing solo. I think everybody should do it. And not all the time and not every race, but I think there's a whole nother aspect of learning when you go out there and you do it alone.
Gotcha.
Especially with the maps and, like you said, having the micro nav and the time management and just all the pieces are all on you. And to be able to do that and then add that into a team dynamic, it's big. Well,
you have to go in as a pretty strong teammate, right? If you have the capacity to race solo and to manage all that, you only bring a benefit to the team because you've done it by yourself. With the right attitude, you can help the team out.
Absolutely.
What's your day-to-day training like now?
So I actually this week am just starting my kind of building up for next year. Because I have the 2 big 5 days on the calendar. I will sprinkle in some other races as far for training and things. But so this week is the start of our kind of building for next year. So doing some retesting this week, like FTP test on the bike and run testing. The past, 2 or 3 months have been weird for me. Crazy work schedule, some sickness that was lingering, stuff like that. So a lot less training than I would normally do day to day. So I'm looking forward to the rebuild and kind of getting back into it. In the gym during race season, I usually try to keep at least 2 days of strength training in the gym. Through this kind of build for next year, I'll be in the gym 3 days doing strength training and then supplementing that with biking and running sprinkled on the other days, and then definitely on the weekends.
Big weekends. Do you work with a coach?
I do.
Mm-hmm. Who's your coach?
Jen
Seger?
Yep.
Yeah. Jen Seger.
Yep. Jen. I started working with Jen in April. I think it was April of 2020.
Okay.
I started working with her. Prior to that, I had used a triathlon coach who said he had done some adventure racing and had some knowledge of the sport. And then I did get some growth from him for sure. I mean, any kind of, consistent progressive training, you're going to get growth from. But you could tell that he, that little bit of adventure racing aspect was definitely missing from the training plan. So after C2C in 2020, I was kind of like everybody else, like, what do we do? Where do we go? I need something to focus on.
Right.
So I had started working with Jen and have been with her ever since. She's awesome.
You could certainly adventure race and not have a coach. You do not need to have a coach to be an adventure racer, by no means.
Oh, for sure.
If you want to sharpen the spear, right? If you really want to really kind of see how far you could tighten yourself up for that, a coach helps in any single aspect of your life, not even adventure racing. Life coaches, athletic-based coaches, corporate coaches, having someone outside your experience talking to you about it is a huge thing. And Jen Seger, who's been a guest of the Dark Zone, we have her coming on again in the next few weeks. Jen has really proven to be one of the preeminent coaches working inside the sport. She does a really, really nice job. Again and again and again, people work with her and have really good results.
She's awesome. I love working out and I love riding my bike and I love training, but sometimes I love it too much that I'll go and do like all the things and none of it's consistent. None of it's progressive and none of it makes any sense. I'm just having a good time, which is what I did for years and it worked.
Right.
But I also don't like to have to think of things to do.
Right.
So just being able to open Training Peaks and be like, oh, Jen wants me to do this today. It's great.
Right.
I don't have to think about it. I just go and do the things. And she, she's an adventure racer herself and she's been coaching a long time. So she knows you need downtime and some days you just want to go ride your mountain bike and not sit on the trainer for 2 hours. So it's awesome that she also works that in too. And, if I'm having a day where I just want to go mountain biking because I had a bad day and I tell her I just wanted to go mountain biking, she's like, okay.
Yeah. I love it. The plan when I see my coach writes, totally free day, do whatever you want.
Isn't
it's
that
like,
great?
oh, this is the greatest. Great. And then I come back 6 hours later. Like, this is the best thing ever. Because I do agree with you. I think adventure racers, a lot of us don't struggle for the desire for movement. And if we're not careful, we could have a lot of garbage movement, right? It's not everything training wise is going to get you there.
And that's kind of where I was. I was at the place where I was doing all the things and, going to the gym. I was still doing CrossFit at the time. And I was riding my bike on the weekends and I was focusing on the things I wanted to do, but they weren't necessarily getting me where I wanted to be. I had to learn that oftentimes there's the misconception that you need to go out and mountain bike because we ride mountain bikes in adventure racing. Well, it took me, years to learn that, riding any kind of endurance riding for hours is more of a benefit than going and mountain biking, for an hour. So things like that, have I've picked up on and just learned over the years.
Sometimes it's fun just to throw that at the wall and see if it sticks because it shows you how tough you could be.
Yep. Oh, we used to, when Samantha and I were training together when she was still racing, we used to throw our packs on, weight them down with whatever we could find.
Water, carry a lot of water. Yep.
Go tromp around town in 30 degrees and fresh snow and just walk all the hills we could find. And then we'd end up at Waffle House eating dinner at 9:30 at night.
Right. Or as we called it, adventure race heaven.
Right. Exactly. It's like, where do you want to be in the middle of the night during an adventure race? A Waffle House.
Waffle House. You turn a corner, you see a coffee shop. It's the greatest thing in the world. Please. Yeah. You're now reading my mail. You know exactly where I want to be. Well, I have to tell you, Mary, you've been, as expected, you've been an excellent guest. For our listeners at home, I want to recap the 5 rules, the Forster rules, if you will.
All right.
One was the idea that you intentionally do hard things, right? You could throw yourself into something that's difficult, challenging. I think the biggest problem that people run into is that they think something's going to be hard and they're going to look bad doing it. And so they don't even try it. It's okay to look bad doing it.
Yep.
The second thing you tell yourself is remember that it's a choice, that you're choosing to be there. And that takes away the ability for you to complain and carry on too much during a race. You said that 3, you will see life differently. And I agree with that you definitely, as a result of adventure racing, it changes your perspective. Number 4, personality beats performance, right?
Yep.
Bring yourself to the race, be the best teammate you could be. It's going to make up for a lot of physical deficiencies that you may think you have, which you probably don't even have. And the last thing was touch every part of the course.
Yep.
Right? Enjoy the full experience. Any closing thoughts before we say goodnight, Mary?
I mean, speaking to those racers who are trying to be better, get better, or just getting into the sport, it's just keep doing the things. Don't be afraid to go out solo and do the things. I feel like that's a valuable experience while it is a team sport. That those solo experiences, I feel like, really helped me get to where I am now.
Thank you, Mary Foster, for joining the Dark Zone. A true trajectory to follow, someone to aspire to, has been a great example for so many racers, myself included. We're grateful to have her on the show. Thank you, listener, for being here for the Dark Zone. We are all fan supported. If you like what we do and want to tell the world, please visit your platform of choice and click and like and friend and favorite. And always feel free to reach out to me, Brian, at ardarkzone.com if you have any thoughts or suggestions. We love the sport. We love the racers. We love talking about adventure racing. So feel free to reach out. Be safe out there and have fun.